Hey everybody, it's Ed O'Keefe and welcome to the Ed O'Keefe Show. I am here today with my new friend, Mr. Jeff Hampton. Now, if you are into short-term rentals, if you own any real estate at all, and if you want to make sure that you are not exposed, Jeff is the guy you got to meet. So this is going to be an exciting show because as somebody who owns a vacation rental and a commercial property, once Jeff started sharing to me how exposed I was and how 78% of the population who owns short-term rentals or commercial properties are exposed, and how easy it is for personal injury attorneys to pierce the veil and come after everything you own, then as scary as this is, you need to stick right here because this is going to be an exciting interview. So, Jeff, I'm super excited to have you on.
Thanks, Ed. Today? I appreciate it. Thanks for bringing me on. I'm doing great.
Yeah, you came in all the way from Dallas to Chicago. I mean, you know.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Absolutely.
So why don't we just dive right in? I mean, what you shared with me when we were chatting yesterday about how high-income professionals, doctors, dentists, people that are using short-term rentals as their investment vehicle to build wealth, whether they only have one property or like you've shared, we're going to talk about some of these stories today of people that own 10, 15 properties who are super experienced pros, have been given false information and are more exposed than they realize.
Sure, absolutely.
So I don't know where to start, but why don't we just start with a little bit of your backstory, how you became an attorney and how you got into helping investors protect themselves. Why don't we start there? That's a good place.
Yeah, so I started off as a litigator. So came right out of law school, worked at the district attorney's office 5.5 years, tried everything from shoplifting to capital murder cases. I came from there, left, started my own law practice, and started a criminal defense practice that I scaled, moved my way out of that. But during that period of time, learned how to build a business, kind of transitioned my way into a new law firm, which was a personal injury law firm. Okay. And so for the last decade or so in that personal injury law firm, I was kind of the big bad wolf on the other side, bringing lawsuits against short-term rental owners, commercial property owners for what's called premises liability events. So slip and falls, swimming pool accidents, you name it. Now, for a long time, I didn't really, that was just my gig, right? That's what I did. So I had no problem with bringing these lawsuits, and I would see how unsophisticated a lot of the market was in terms of particularly short-term rentals, but I didn't own any short-term rentals. Okay. And now where the transition came for me is when my wife and I began to invest in short-term rentals, right? So now we grew our portfolio as we began to expand it. As first time I bought a short-term rental, the first thing I thought was all the stories that came back through my head in the past when I would come into court, bring a lawsuit against a short-term rental owner, and I would say, wait a minute, here's what works, here's what doesn't work. And immediately, I wanted to take my rentals, put them in the most protective structure that I knew. And of course, you know, I like to share information with people. So I started talking to some other folks that are in short-term rental space. And they just had so many misunderstandings.
Well, why don't you actually share that story? Because yesterday you shared how you were actually at a highly sophisticated mastermind. Yeah. These are all really good. Like, so when just so everyone understands, like when I first started listening to you, I was thinking, all right, this has to be for like people that don't know what they're doing. But what you were sharing was people who were in this mastermind, they're paying a lot of money, they own a lot of properties, very bright guys, and they had asked you a question like, well, Jeff, how do you protect your properties? And after you were sharing it, which we're gonna go through actually how Jeff does protect his properties and how he recommends you do as well, what was their response when you started sharing that with them?
Yeah, they were floored. I mean, so it happened very organically. We were just sitting there talking about ways to improve, grow wealth. I mean, that's what everybody wants to do. You're buying a short-term rental because you want to build wealth and you want to create cash flow. And so somebody spontaneously asked the question, maybe a group of 10 of us, high level, I mean, it's like 25 grand minimum to get into this type of arrangement. They look over and they say, but how do you guys protect yourself from lawsuits? How do you avoid getting sued? And immediately someone looked over at me and said, Jeff, you're a lawyer, right? Tell me how that works. What kind of lawyer were you? And I said, well, did personal injury law. And I actually sued short-term rental owners. And immediately they're like, okay, you got to tell us, what do we have to do? So all I did is literally share with them what I do, right? So I said, well, let me walk you through. Well, as soon as I started to do that, they said, I've never even heard of this. I mean, I've heard of ways to protect my assets and use LLCs, but I had no idea that some of the things that I've been taught traditionally, whether it be through my accountant, through the CPA that I've talked to, whether it be through information on Google or different YouTube channels that are out there, it's incomplete. And you know how people work. If they take some information, they piece it together, and they think that that is how they do it. And they've learned that that was not the case. And immediately, like 8 out of the 12 people who were there looked over at me and said, Jeff, you got to help us do this. Because I don't even know where to start. How do I find someone that knows all the laws in these different states? How do I know to navigate if I'm going to be a multi-state investor? And that kind of brought it to a head where I realized there's so much misinformation out there. There needs to be some clarity about the right way to do it.
Yeah. So I want to ask you about the misinformation. Yeah. I want to ask you about some of the why that misinformation actually is being passed on to really intelligent investors and people, or even if you're new getting into it, wherever you might be on your journey. Do you mind sharing a question I asked you yesterday that I thought was really, before we go into the myths and why they get bad information and what some of the bad information is, when someone comes to you, because you weren't even planning on having a practice around short-term rentals and commercial properties for investors. It just kind of happened organically. So I just wanted to lay that out. And what are like, why when people come to you and they're like, hey, Jeff, this is what I want to have happen. Like you'd mentioned a couple things. Like number one, they want to stay, like why is this even important in the first place? Yeah. So before we get into the myths, because, you know.
Yeah, so I mean, for most people, they obviously, the biggest concern is they don't want to be sued. And it's kind of like, what are the consequences if I don't get this right? Well, number one, it's one thing, if you have a short-term rental, let's talk about high risk and low risk assets. The reality of it is, I kind of label things by exempt assets, low risk assets, and high risk assets. Now, exempt assets, you can talk about things like 401ks, sometimes your homestead. You don't have to worry as much about those because there's certain state and federal law protections. Low risk assets might be kind of like maybe a property management company or a standalone business where your entity structure is just having money flow through there, but it doesn't own any properties. Okay. But think about if you've got long-term rentals, short-term rentals, and even multifamily investments. Short-term rentals are the highest risk assets in the real estate space because people are coming in and out. The average daily stay or the average stay is 7 days or less. So if you have a successful short-term rental, you're having thousands of people come stay in your place. That's right. They're also staying there as a vacation rental most often. So people are having their drinks, they're having a good time, they're doing some things maybe a little bit more casually than they would normally. And as a result of that, it bears out. Insurance industry says it's the highest risk real estate asset you can have. And on the litigation side, it's one of the highest risk assets you can have. So we're worried about what? We're worried about a lawsuit, but we're worried about if there is a lawsuit, can that attorney get to my personal assets if they sue my short-term rental? Right. So if they can actually penetrate and get access to that short-term rental, what about all my other assets? Is there a chance they could get to me as well?
Yeah, which is super important is if you so a lot of high-income professionals are told like, hey, if you run a business, go buy a commercial property. Right. As you're making money, you may have a vacation home that you turn into a rental property or a second home, right? And then you have your personal premises that you grow up in. And you know, one of the myths that you'd mentioned, and I want to go over, I have a few more things to go over, but like is that insurance is enough.
Right. Yeah, that's a really big one. First of all, and I'll talk about this in relation to short-term rentals for a second. Insurance is not enough. And here's on a basic premise, here's what I tell people. Look, do you really want to trust your net worth and the protection of your net worth to a third party who quite frankly has every incentive legally to deny your claim? And that's really, that happens all the time. I mean, think about it. Insurance companies make money by not paying out on claims. If they pay out on every claim that comes to them, and I know this because I used to sue insurance companies as part of my commercial property and short-term rental, the defendants that I would go after as a plaintiff's attorney. And insurance companies would find any ticky-tack reason to get out of that. So the problem is, I'm a big believer, well, let me tell you this, I'm a big believer in what we call layered asset protection. Insurance is a layer, okay? But by itself, what if your claim is denied? And more importantly, what if the damage amount is above your claim or above your protection amount? So when we start talking about insurance, number one, do you need it? Absolutely. But you need the right kind of insurance. and with it,
which we're going to cover.
which we're going to cover. And then secondly, most people are underinsured if they are at all. And then what if someone is paralyzed or someone dies at the property? It's going to go above the amount of whatever you're insured for. And now you're talking about everything that you might have in your personal name, your personal assets could be at risk.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. So you'd mentioned something yesterday that I hadn't heard before, but you said most investors, when they're doing short-term rentals, they want to appear poor on paper, or that's one of the strategies.
That's right. So, I mean, as you grow wealth, the problem is it leaves clues as to who owns what, right? So I'm going to tell you from a personal injury lawyer's perspective.
Well, that's so this is why I'm so excited about this, because like we have on this is like asking the prosecuting attorney who's put people in prison for years to now be the defense attorney.
Right.
You know, like
Right.
It's like a MacGyver, not a MacGyver, whatever. My mom would be proud because we used to grow up watching, what's that old guy who was the attorney years ago? Gosh.
Oh, Perry Mason?
Yes. It's like a bachelor of Perry. I'm interviewing Perry Mason right now, but just for the short-term rental space.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of analogize it to say I'm the hacker who now works for the government to help you not get hacked.
That's a great way to do it. Yeah.
But let's think of it this way. So first of all, if I'm bringing a lawsuit, let's say you own a property in Florida. Maybe you have a beach house.
Yeah, this is a great example.
Something bad happens at that property, slip and fall, maybe someone injured, maybe you didn't, for whatever reason, whether it's your fault or not. Because the reality of it is if someone gets hurt, somebody's getting sued. And so if you're the property owner, you're the deep pocket. They're going after you. So let's say that happens. I'm going to go to the Florida Secretary of State, even if you have an LLC, okay? Let's say you've put your property in an LLC. If I can go to the Florida Secretary of State and I'm going to see your name listed as the member on that LLC.
Okay.
Now, you say, okay, well, so what? It's still an LLC. I have protection, right? Well, watch out. Here's what I would do. I would bring a lawsuit against your LLC and you personally because you are a member. Now, there's a concept known as piercing the veil. Now, here's what I would do. There are a number of items that if you did not follow the law in these areas, and most people do not do it, overwhelmingly, most people don't, then I could bring a lawsuit in front of the court. You're a party to it, just like your LLC is, and I'm going to argue that this is basically an alter ego of you, and you're not running this as a legitimate business, so I can pierce the veil of the protection of that LLC. Because at its core, what is an LLC? An LLC is a limited liability company that separates your ownership of the asset from the control of the asset. That's what's key. But let's say you commingled funds.
And almost 99.9% of people do it, right?
Everybody does this.
Even if you're almost perfect.
100%. You could be standing in line at Costco, and I use this as an example because we've done it. I mean, everybody's done it. As you stand in line at Costco, you find something that looks great for your rental property. Maybe you or your wife, this is the only card I got on me, I'm going to pay for it, I'll reimburse me from the business account. That's commingling funds. Your commingled business and personal funds, that's one of the areas that I would go in now if I know who you are. If I know that you are the listed member, if you did, let's say you commingled funds, let's say you failed to file your annual meeting minutes or have an annual meeting. Let's say you failed to do your unanimous consent instruments, your state report filings. If you failed to do those things and I now know who you are, then I can potentially pierce the veil. And here's why the pierce the veil matters. I can hold you personally liable, including all of your assets for the actions of that business. And now I pulled apart that protection and I'm getting to whatever else you might have.
Which just so we're all clear on this, that means you can go after my personal property.
100%. Everything
you can
else.
Go after my retirement.
Anything that's not covered under the bankruptcy code. Now here's the thing. Okay. There are certain things that are protected when I talked about exempt assets. Employer-sponsored 401ks, totally exempt under the Employee Retirement Income Securities Act.
Right.
You have individual IRAs are protected up to about 1.5 million. They're adjusted for inflation. Okay. But what about everything else you've got? Brokerage accounts. Yeah. Some people, own crypto, brokerage accounts. What if you've got other properties? Some people don't rent them out, but it doesn't matter. Whatever liquid cash, anything else that you might have, all of that is susceptible because I'll put a judgment on it. That judgment means you can't sell any of this stuff unless you pay me. Yeah. And then as a result of that, here's the real problem though. Think about this, Ed. The real problem is it cripples you from making future investments. Now you're absolutely paralyzed. Good luck trying to get a loan when you've got a judgment against you on everything else. Good luck being able to actually scale the rest of your portfolio. You've put yourself in limbo in that situation, and you've dramatically limited your ability to continue to grow wealth.
Hey, so Jeff, this is amazing stuff. Do you mind for everybody, just can you share either a couple examples of real people that you're working with, or when they came to you, you could have saved them if they came to you a year before and done this right?
Yeah, so one example is, and this is really a tragedy. I knew somebody in the Broken Bow, Oklahoma area, which is very popular vacation rental area, thousands and thousands of properties there. They reached out to me originally, and they wanted to know more information about short-term rental protection, asset protection generally. I gave them kind of a full rundown of everything that they needed to do, but between the time they met with me and before they made a decision about what they wanted to do, they had a guest come and stay at the property. And as they were there, it was a very beautiful cabin. I mean, the cabin, probably $1 million cabin, right, had could sleep 20 plus people. So the family came and stayed. They were on the back patio, having a great time, cooking hot dogs, bratwurst, hamburgers, everything else. The problem was they weren't paying attention to the grill. And
it's never happened.
Yeah, right. All of us guys know this. We're busy doing other things. All of a sudden, a grease fire erupts, right? Mm-hmm. And it's under the covered patio area, beautiful, huge covered patio. But the grease fire got a little out of control. They weren't paying attention because they were out on their pickleball court that was out in the back. And then all of a sudden they see the fire. They try to run over. And even though I know whether the fire extinguisher would have put out a grease fire or not, the point is they didn't do anything. They literally panicked. They didn't call 911. They got in their car, they loaded up their stuff, and they drove away. Wow. Now, what started off as a grease fire turned into a cabin fire that turned in the entire investment being on fire. And as a result of that, here's the lesson they learned. Number one, they had the wrong kind of insurance. Yeah. They had a second home residential policy that did not provide what's called an all-risk policy that allowed them, if someone burns down their cabin, this was a commercial activity. Number one, they were underinsured because the cost of being able to rebuild relative to what they were insured for left them a $250,000 gap in coverage. But secondly, they still have to pay for all this stuff. Like, they have a mortgage, right? And so what are they going to do? Try to sue these people? Their insurance company's not going to help them. Yeah. And they didn't have the property properly in an asset protection structure as well. This is an example that every layer matters, right? Now, I bring that up to say this completely stymied these people. I mean, literally from that point forward, they couldn't buy another investment for years because they were stuck there. They were having a loan that they had to pay. By the way, it took them 15 months to do a rebuild. So think about doing the rebuild. During that time, they still had to do more. They had to pay their mortgage. Wow. During that period of time, they didn't have loss of income coverage for the commercial insurance policy, which meant all of it came out of their pocket. So they weren't properly insured. And I use that as an example to talk about why insurance is a layer that's very important. Yeah. Then I'm going to show you another example.
Well, I got a question. This is kind of a stupid question, just because I'm being the naive person here. So when you work with people, which I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit of how you actually help people, but like you actually review all their insurance policies to make sure that they have the right insurance for their entire asset.
Absolutely. And actually, this is a really good point. And just to give people a preview of this, one way to do that is I tell everybody, if you go to your policy, page 60 to 80 range of your policy, no one reads back there. All they do is read the primary lead sheet on everything, and they look to see what their coverage is. It's some homework for everybody. Right. So seriously, get to your policy, and what you're going to find out is page 60 to 80, you're going to have a section known as exclusions. In that exclusion section, there's going to be what's called business or commercial use exclusions. No one reads it. No one pays attention to it. But I find a lot of insurance agents, and this is why we provide this as a service. You want to make sure you get the right coverage. A lot of insurance agents will come to you and say, hey, you're covered. We're going to add even a little short-term rental rider onto this. Yeah. How many days do you think a year do you rent this out? And then people always underestimate it because they don't want to pay as much. They go, does it maybe 120, 180? And then if you do well, you're renting it out all the time, right? And so but in that section, there's a section that says commercial use or business exclusion, business activity exclusions. Every court in the country has ruled that short-term rental activity is business use or commercial use. So what do you think? I talked about this earlier. It's a third party that wants to deny your claim. What do you think you're giving them if you get this type of coverage? If a liability event takes place and you show up in court, what do you think the insurance attorney is going to argue? There's exclusions. There's exclusions right here. Wow. They should have read it. It was on page 60 to 80. So a lot of people come to us and clients will say, let's
Ask
read
a dumb
it.
question. Like, so what you're saying is that the insurance agent is selling you the insurance coverage you need, but then when you go to court, it's the wrong insurance.
And here's one reason.
Possible. Like, okay, let's just say everyone has the best of intentions.
Right. Yeah, and here's part
Why
of the
does this happen? Is
Well,
what I'm
part of the
trying to
reason why this happens, great question. Part of the reason why this happens is over 70% of short-term rental owners don't even have, they buy a property in their personal name. So they don't buy it in an LLC. They don't have it in an LLC. When do you get insurance? You get insurance when you buy the property, right? Yeah. So you do that at closing. You have to have insurance before you go to closing. Your mortgage company's not going to agree to the loan. So what happens is you call and you tell them, I'm buying a short-term rental property. Okay, you don't tell them it's in an LLC, so they're not going to push you to the commercial division. You're buying it in your personal name. So what are they going to do? Give you a residential policy. Wow. And they don't care because they're making money on the policy. And it's up to you. The burden is on you to read your policy language, not on the insurance provider. Wow. You can get insurance for anything, and it may not cover you if you don't know how to read it. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why that happens.
Okay, well, I just gotta say to everybody, like, if you're watching this right now and you're as sick to your stomach as I am right now about how you are potentially exposed, even just we haven't even gone over the plan yet. Just make sure you go to strlawguys.com. You can get a consult with Jeff or one of his team members, and like text your wife, text your husband, text your spouse, text your partners. You guys got to do this, and we're not even a third of the way. Like, I have so many questions left, but I just want to throw that out there. So you were going to share another example.
Yeah. So another example is a gentleman called me. He owned, I think it was 4 cabins in the Smokies in Tennessee. Yeah. Also owned a beachfront property in Florida. And the problem was he had a property, one of the properties that he was sued. So what happened is it was a property in Sevierville, Tennessee. And he ended up having a lady walking down some stairs, an older lady walking down some stairs. His handrail was not completely fastened. It was a little loose. She lost control of it, fell back, hit her head on the stairs. And, on the part that would hurt the most, like on the edge of that stairs, ends up pretty significant injuries. Wow. Okay. So what ends up happening is she's transferred over. She's in the hospital for several weeks, lots of medical bills, lots of expenses. He calls over to me in a panic asking, hey, can you put together asset protection for me as quickly as possible before they serve me with papers because I'm being sued? Yeah. And I had to tell him, man, look, unfortunately, that can't happen. Yeah. So I kind of, it's not a joke, but I tell people this is a peacetime effort. It is not a wartime affair. Wow. You cannot decide that you want to now try to obtain asset protection when you're already in the midst of a lawsuit. Yeah. Because under the law, there's something known as a look-back period or what's known as a fraudulent transfer that people are looking at. The courts are looking at it saying, did you only throw all this together at the last minute to protect yourself from a lawsuit? Because if that's the only reason why you did it, we're going to pierce right through what you're trying to put together. Yeah. So what he ended up doing is coming to me and he's like, Jeff, can you help me put my asset protection structure together? And I told him, I can help you with putting some things together, but you're going to have to settle this suit. Now think about it. This guy was worth about $10 million. Wow. He's hanging out there bare for everyone to see. Guess what the lawyer did? The lawyer sent him a demand letter, informed him that he also knew about his other holdings and his other assets, and told him that essentially, not only we're going to go after you on your insurance piece, but we're also going to bring a lawsuit against you personally because of your negligence. And this is what I want people to understand. They say, why would I get sued? Here's the number one reason. I brought lawsuits. It's known as a negligence lawsuit. You have a duty as a short-term rental owner, and I own short-term rentals, a duty to provide reasonable care to every guest. You breach that duty if someone gets hurt, even if it's an unscrupulous attorney bringing a lawsuit against you, they're going to argue you breached it even if you didn't. If it causes, point number 3 is causation, if it causes damages, that brings you into a courtroom. And so when people say, you don't need asset protection until you need it. And then when you need it, it's too late. You needed to already have it. And that's why it's critical. He learned that lesson. I felt terrible for him. And I told him, you need to settle this lawsuit. Let's get back together and we can put everything else together to protect the remainder of your assets that you still have.
I love this. This is great. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to ask you a favor. Like, do you mind drawing out how he had his, because if I'm watching this right now, I'm saying like, well, Jeff, I think I'm protected. Right. Do you mind, and so this gentleman thought he was protected. Do you mind showing us like what the typical protection is that most people have?
Yeah.
And you could share his example directly, and then how you would just restructure that to have him fully protected.
Yeah, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna walk you through what I call a good, better, and best approach, okay? Now, and this may apply to a number of folks who are watching this. To start off with, you say, how do I get a good approach? 70+% of short-term rental owners have the property in their personal name. They close in their personal name. How do they get this asset out of their personal name into an LLC, okay? Good. What is the good approach? Now, why do I call it good? Well, because at a very basic level, you have got to get these assets out of your personal name into an LLC. The whole concept of an LLC is a limited liability company that I said earlier, you separate your ownership of the asset from your control. You legally do not own it anymore, okay? So essentially now you do not own it, but you control everything. That's the goal of asset protection. So how do we do this? Now let's say you've got the example I showed earlier, the guy in Tennessee, right? He's got his Tennessee property. Well, right now it's in his personal name. He purchased this, and I could go into more depth in this about if you buy in a conventional loan, you cannot close in an LLC. It's not allowed. So the only way you can do this is you close in an LLC, or you close in your personal name. Now you have to convert this into an LLC. Now, in order to do that, how does this work? You have to do a deed transfer, okay? And I know my handwriting's not the greatest, but you have to do a deed transfer. In order to do this though, if you move the property from your personal name into an LLC, this must happen. You mentioned this earlier, Ed. What are some of the misconceptions? I have many people who come to me and say, hey Jeff, I already set up an LLC, but the property is still in my personal name, but I'm doing all of my banking out of that LLC. I'm good, right? Absolutely not. Yeah, unless you move the property into this LLC, you have no asset protection. You're just using the LLC as a management company, a property management company, and it's providing you no asset protection. So you must transfer it over. The problem is, when you do this, you're going to run into three problems, three main issues. Number one, what do you not know? You don't know what you don't know when you do this, and I run into this all the time with people. Number one is a concept known as real estate transfer taxes. So hopefully you can read that. So essentially what this means is about 2/3 of the state in the country have a tax. If you move an asset from your personal name into an LLC, the government's going to come in and say, thank you very much.
Wow.
That can be anywhere between 0.2% up to 3% of the value of the entire asset. Now, imagine this poor guy here.
Yeah, so if you own $1 million property, that is anywhere between $2,000 to $30,000 in just pure taxes to fix this issue.
That's right, if you don't handle this right. So I have a lot of people that'll come in and tell me, hey Jeff, I'm gonna just do this on my own. I heard somebody on the internet tell me that I could just do what's called a quit claim deed. And I put this in here because I write it in red because that's a big no. Because here's the problem, if you quit claim deed it, when I was in law school, you could quit claim anything. Basically, they teach you that you could quit claim the moon if you wanted to. It doesn't mean you have an ownership interest in it. All you do is write up a form. But guess who pays attention when you quit claim deed something? The government. The government. So in this situation, this is just one of your first issues. The second issue, and this is less of a concern, but there's something known as the due on sale clause. Now, why does this matter? This is critical if you currently have a low interest rate. All of you that bought properties back in 2020, 2021, and you were getting them at 2.5%, 3% interest. If they're still in your personal name and you want to move them over into an LLC, unless it's an FHA, Fannie or Freddie product, if you try to move that over, here's what's going to happen. The mortgage company, and this is happening right now, Bigger Pockets did a big episode on this year. And what they did is they said there are due on sale clause investigations where when you move this property from your personal name in a conventional mortgage over into an LLC, you signed a contract with your mortgage company, not your LLC. So the moment you move this asset over, you breached your contract. So here's what happened. Rocket Mortgage, actually, a guy called me just about 8 weeks ago. He was at a 2.89% interest rate. He quit claim deeded the property over into an LLC. Rocket Mortgage called him, accelerated him to a 6.9. Now, he had two choices. He was either going to have to pay the entire amount of the note all up front because they called the note due, or he was now going to have to go from 2.89 to 6.9%. Now, Ed, how do you think that affected his cash flow?
Oh, tremendously.
I mean, it devastated him. So he didn't even know this could happen. Finally, point number 3, and forgive me if I'm getting in the weeds too much here. Point number 3 is, what if you want to do a refi? Okay? Now, this is really important. If you're in a state with a real estate transfer tax and you move the property into this LLC, and let's say you're fine with choking up and paying the first time, what about people right now buying at 7 to what may soon be almost 9%? What if you're in the 7 to 9% range? You think they're going to want to refi that later? Absolutely. They're not going to want to sit at that amount. What goes up must come down. The rates are going to come down later. When they do come down, what happens when you want to now refi a conventional mortgage in an LLC? The mortgage company won't let you. So now they're going to tell you, pull it out. Well, Ed, what do you think happens when they pull it out? They got this again. So they're going to get hit not once, they're going to get hit twice. They have to pull it out to refi, right? And then they have to put it back in.
Which costs $2,000 to $30,000.
That's right.
Depending on what the...
That's right. And then what happens when they finish the refi? They still they got to do it again.
Wow.
Now, that's like, unexpected closing costs you didn't expect were going to hit you on a refi. The solution to this, and I don't want to just talk about problems, the solution to this is a land trust, okay? So when we talk about a land trust, essentially what happens, I'm going to show this as another illustration here. When you talk about a land trust, here's what happens. Now what we do is you've got the same Tennessee. You say, now we've got a new Tennessee LLC, right? Yeah. And now what do? We use a land trust, and I'm going to explain what this is. A land trust is a simple grantor trust you move land into, you move property into. Now there's two components to a land trust. There is a trustee, and there's a beneficiary. Now let me explain the brilliant thing about this. I kind of call the land trust like your Swiss Army knife, your utility knife in real estate. Here's the great thing about it. You would set up, you as the owner would be the beneficiary. You move the property into the land trust. It actually holds that, okay? Now, when I want to avoid these, remember we put all these in red down here? I want to avoid all this stuff. I don't want to have to deal with any of these issues. The way to do that is to assign your beneficial interest in this land trust up to your LLC. It's called an assignment of beneficial interest. It's a legal documentation that you can put together. Now, here's the brilliant thing. If you work with us or who are a third party or another attorney, if you have a trustee would be your lawyer. They file it in public record and it lists us as your attorney being the trustee at first.
Which creates the privacy.
That's right.
And,
it creates privacy. We resign as soon as we file it. You become the successor trustee, but in public record, it still shows us.
Wow.
What if you get an unscrupulous lawyer trying to come around and find out who's involved in this? We get to say attorney-client privilege. It's not us.
Wow.
Okay, so totally off the books. No one knows you've done it, but you can now assign your beneficial interest into this LLC. What is a beneficial interest? It's anything worth suing. It's anything that has value. You now assign it into the LLC, but the property never left the land trust. So because it never left the land trust, what does that mean? No real estate transfer taxes. What does that mean? No due on sale clause. Because under the land trust, there's a law known as the Garn State Germain Act from 1982. It says if you use a land trust to convey ownership into an LLC, there is no due on sale clause. Okay, now I know I'm giving you a lot here, Ed. The last part, though, that's important, we talked about the refi. Well, all you got to do is reassign your beneficial interest back to the land trust. We convert the land trust to a living trust, complete the refi. It's called restating the trust. Complete the refi, move it back into the living trust, back into the LLC. No real estate transfer taxes, no refi problems.
And just so everyone understands, this is what you do for people. So Jeff's teaching this to you so that you understand what's possible for you to do.
That's right.
This is not like for you to like be making notes to go do it yourself, because it's just, first of all, you're not qualified to do it, and second of all, obviously this gets in the weeds a little bit and is a little advanced.
Okay, I know I got a little granular with everybody, but let me just give you a quick recap on the good. Good is you have to get this out of your personal into an LLC. Yeah. And sometimes you have to use a land trust to help bridge the gap. Yeah. Okay? Now, when we talked about this, the gentleman, the story that I told you about earlier, he couldn't even seem to figure this part out because he was overwhelmed with how to navigate this, because he didn't want to have to pay those taxes. He felt like insurance was going to be enough.
And so he kept just like banging away, adding one more rental property, one more rental property, one more rental property. And the foundation just was, he was on sandy ground.
That's right. And now he did have one of his other properties in an LLC out of another state. Remember I talked about Florida. The problem is the property that he had in Florida, the real question is an LLC enough? Yeah. And here's the mistake that he made. This LLC that he had was single member. A single member LLC is, and here's how this happens, Ed. A lot of CPAs will recommend that you put your property in an LLC, yeah. But they'll tell you you should do it in a single member LLC because it's better for your taxes from you can be labeled a disregarded entity, which means you don't have to file a tax return, okay? The problem is there's an old saying in asset protection, if the IRS disregards you, then there's a good chance the court's going to disregard your protection. So a single member LLC can be very deficient if this is all you're relying upon in order to protect your assets. The other problem I see people do, other common misconception that comes up all the time, is people want to put multiple properties into one LLC.
Right. So the good is actually really designed for one property.
Yeah, maybe one property, if you're just starting out, is to get it out of your personal name into an LLC. Well, once you start doing what you said, Ed, which is now you're adding properties, right? Yeah. So the number one misconception is somebody will go, oh, I'm going under contract. I'll just put it in the same LLC. Well, the problem is you're putting all your eggs in one basket. Yeah. What do you think is going to happen if in the past, if I was the one bringing the lawsuit and something bad happens at one of your properties, what do you think is going to happen? I'm going to be licking my chops because I'm going to say, wait a minute, now I've got two properties in one LLC. That's right. This is fantastic. I'm going to be able to force a sale on both. Okay? And that's the negative here. We go from good to, frankly, we need to start talking about better. If you're going to become a real investor.
Well, can I ask you to explain, like from a personal injury attorney's perspective, why are they licking their chops at this when they see multiple properties under one LLC?
Yeah, well, the reason why is because if you've got now, let's say, two properties here in this LLC, one bad thing happens, slip and fall. I'm going to bring a lawsuit against this LLC, and I'm now going to be able to, if I win, I can get what's called a charging order. A charging order is basically a right that I can have to make you sell everything in this LLC.
Yeah, so if you have four properties, all four properties are frozen upon this, and then the attorney and the plaintiff, I guess, has the ability of getting all of it.
That's right. So you're exactly right. That's a very good point on your part, which is as soon as the lawsuit happens, everything in this LLC freezes. You can't move anything out.
And I think that's one of the scariest parts is that if I have four profitable properties and I have one small incident, and it could be a small incident from just somebody who's whatever, and all of a sudden everything's frozen, well, I might not be able to move cash flow out to pay for any of the stuff all of a sudden.
Yeah, we see, and I'll show you here in a second how that's actually even a concern on the better. Because we talk about good, better, and best. But even putting multiple properties into one LLC, I see this as a very common thing. I mean, I've worked with people that are, I thought, fairly advanced investors, and they are, but they thought they were protected by putting multiple properties into a single LLC. So I tell people, here's the rule. One property, one LLC. one business, one LLC. Isolate the risk, segregate the property. Don't put yourself in a position where all your eggs are in one basket. It's unnecessary risk. So we don't want to do that.
Let's do better
Now, so let's talk about better. How do we move? Yeah, let's do that. Let's talk about better. How do we get to better? Well, this is where now you're going from one, instead of having one property, you're doing two, right? Let's say we're moving up. We're getting at least 2 to 4 properties, right? Why not just stick with an LLC? Well, there's 2 negatives about only using an LLC by itself. There's 2 things you do not have. You do not have privacy in most states, and you do not have charging order protection. I kind of gave you a little bit of hint on the charging order protection a little earlier. But why does privacy matter? Because I told you earlier, if I can go and find who you are as the listed member from the Secretary of State, I'm going to sue you personally, and I might be able to pierce the veil. And if I can get a charging order against you, I can make you sell your property to pay the attorney.
Crazy.
Now, how do we avoid that? Now we do what we call a holding company strategy. This same situation here, we could have that Tennessee LLC, okay, now owned by a Wyoming holding company LLC. Now, why does this matter? Here's the way it works. You can keep the single member LLC, but now you don't own it. It's important. If you have it owned by the right state's holding company LLC, let me give you the anatomy of a lawsuit just so we break it down because we're back on that again. If I'm going to bring the lawsuit and I'm a Tennessee attorney, I'm going to go to the Tennessee Secretary of State, and what am I going to find? I'm going to find now, instead of it being owned by you, it's owned by a Wyoming LLC. So I now have to go to a Wyoming Secretary of State, and they're going to say, stop right there. Here in our state, we have special beneficial laws where we cannot give you the names of the members. So, and I've done this as an attorney, and I'm like, okay, I can't bring a lawsuit against the members because I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But secondly, any good lawyer is going to now know, what do you gain from this? 2 big benefits. 1 is privacy. Number 2 is the charging order protection. Now let's talk about what that means, and this is huge. Now, as an attorney, I know that if I bring a lawsuit starting here and I extend it into Wyoming, even if I win right here, Ed, I still lose because I can't make you sell. Charging order protection means you can keep renting it out. You can keep paying all your expenses, your mortgage. You can even pay yourself an operator's fee. Yeah. The only thing you can't do is pay yourself a distribution. So think about what this does now. How do personal injury lawyers get paid? And some of you may not know this. They get paid on what's called, we get paid a percentage of the recovery, just to keep it simple. We get paid a percentage of the recovery. Well, what if I can't recover?
Yeah.
What if I can't make you sell? What does that mean? That means now I don't get paid if I'm the personal injury lawyer, the client doesn't get paid, and the attorney has to pay all the expenses under a contingency fee arrangement out of their own pocket on the front end. So you become very unattractive when you set it up this way. Yeah. And especially when we use the example you gave, Ed, let's say now we're talking about a Florida LLC as well, right? You can have multiple properties that are owned under the same holding company, all of them single member, so you do not have to file tax returns down here, but every one of these properties gains the benefit of privacy and charging order protection.
And so, just so we're all clear on this, so then that means that on the personal injury attorney, he's going to go back to the client and say, you might as well just go after their insurance because that's the default.
That's right. Good asset protection, and this is significantly better than the good. And I know we're mixing examples
That's
here.
okay. No, we're good. I think this is really good.
This is significantly better because here you're very unattractive to me as a personal injury lawyer. Good asset protection pushes attorneys down to good insurance every time.
Yeah, that's right. That's a writer-downer. Good asset protection pushes attorneys down to good insurance every time.
That's right.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so that's why we talk about layers.
That's why you get insurance.
That's right. You've got to have
the right
the
insurance. Yeah, totally.
100% correct. And at the end of this, one of the things I want to give everybody at the end, Ed, is I want to remind them of all the layers of everything they need to know. But this right here is a lot better. This that we talk about here, you're adding something you don't have up here. Okay? Now, what's the limitation? The only limitation to this is, let's say you're really investing, you're scaling your portfolio. Yeah. Let's say you buy in Gulf Shores, right? Let's say you're going to buy in Colorado. Maybe you buy a Breckenridge property or something and you're going to rent it out. So now you've got all these LLCs. You have this, You have privacy and charging order protection. But what happens if one of the properties gets sued in Alabama? Let's use this one as an example. What if this one gets sued? Well, what's the effect? If I bring a lawsuit against this Alabama LLC and now it's in litigation, here's the problem. Everything in this Wyoming LLC holding company locks down. So think about it. If I've got, let's say we've talking about more than 4 or 5 properties. Now I can't move any of these properties out of this holding company during the lawsuit. And if I have any money that was going to be used from the entire portfolio to help improve properties on that portfolio, I can't use it. There's a concept known as fraudulent transfer analysis. Fraudulent transfer analysis means that under this structure, the way that an LLC is just designed by law, you can't move anything out of it once you're sued. So imagine people with larger portfolios. They don't want to be held hostage, feeling like there's no way to be able to manage their portfolio just because one of them gets sued.
Can I ask a question? So you're using different states there, but hypothetically, if I have, say, 6 in Tennessee, same exact scenario, correct?
Correct.
I just want to make sure if you're watching, you're like, well, I have all mine in Tennessee. Why does it matter? Why the Alabama doesn't apply to me? It does.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's correct. I use this as an example of a diverse state portfolio, but it would be the same.
State portfolios would have the same issues.
That's correct. Right. Same concern, because your holding company, the way the law or the courts have interpreted this, they are looking to see if you're moving anything under this structure that would be a fraudulent transfer. And the point of a fraudulent transfer, which is why you would move it around, is to avoid it being taken in a lawsuit, right? And so the one thing you do not have here is you do not have what we call, and I know this is more of a lawyer term here, you do not have post-lawsuit flexibility. You don't have that, which means you're not allowed to move these assets out of here if you're scaling, if you're going to add more.
Okay, so how do we fix that?
All right, so now let's go to the best. Now we talk about a best structure, and this is perhaps the most comprehensive that you can, that allows you to take care of all of these issues. So under the same example, let's say we've got now a,
And while you're writing that, one of the things that Jeff and I talked a lot about yesterday was that you have different types of short-term rental investors. You have people that they have one property and they're totally happy with that. There's no desire to move outside that. Well, then, the good and the better might be perfect for you. But if you're growing your portfolio and you're trying to build wealth or you already have built wealth and you're trying to protect it, this is where really spending the extra either money and time and having an advanced best asset protection strategy is not only the responsible thing to do for you and your family and your generations, but it's really just to make enjoy your growth of that snowball, And so this is unbelievable to me.
So, and that's a very good point, Ed. Look, I'm a huge believer in building a legacy, but I'm also a pretty big believer in making sure that you protect that legacy. And I use this as an example because let's say we're talking about a growing portfolio. LLC, maybe I say Tennessee, Alabama, Texas, Oklahoma.
But this is true with sorry to interrupt you, this is true for entrepreneurs. So I'm growing I have 2 businesses. A lot of guys who own 2 businesses, or whether they're even doctors with multiple practices, they own multiple locations. Right. These things, this sounds complex, but this adds up really quickly and easily. The complexity adds up really quickly without you not even knowing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, which is I've got clients that I work with that have short-term rentals. They have apartment complexes. They have long-term rentals. Doctors with multiple locations that they put them in separate LLCs for exactly this reason that we're discussing here. All of this transfers over, and the primary strategy here is as I get bigger, I'm a bigger target. As I have more wealth, I'll become a bigger target. And what are our main goals? This structure here I'm about to go over with you, you still want to keep your privacy. You still want to keep your charging order protection, but now you want that post-lawsuit flexibility. You want to make sure that if something bad happens, you're going to be able to find a way to not have everything else at risk and still have the ability to manage your portfolio.
You need to make sure, so post-lawsuit flexibility, it's an advanced lawsuit, or it's a lawyer term. Yeah. So what that just means is I want to still be able to run my businesses even if one of my properties gets sued.
That's right.
And to enjoy the cash flow and still grow and whatever. Okay,
Much better way.
Which is what we're going to talk about here.
That's exactly right. Much better way to say it. That's exactly what it is. So here's what we do. Same structure in theory. Every property should still be a single member LLC. Owned now, instead of by you or a Wyoming LLC, it's owned by an Arizona limited partnership. The best way I know how to describe these is many people have heard of real estate syndications, where real estate syndications, maybe like Grant Cardone has a fund, right? He'll tell you, come and invest in our 500 unit apartment complex. Well, here's how that works. If Grant is the one running the fund, if Grant's running the fund, he is the general partner. And because he's the general partner, he has the red line of liability.
Oh, wow.
So what that means is the general partner who's in control of everything, that's Grant. If you and I, Ed, if we invest in his fund, I have no idea what Grant Cardone's doing. I hope I get paid. I hope it goes well, right? So, and I would trust that he's going to do that, but since I'm not involved in the day-to-day, what am I? I'm a limited partner, okay? Here's the great thing that you can do under this structure. We, in this structure, we set it up where we set up a limited partner, revocable trust. You can also use an irrevocable trust right there. That owns 99.5% of the entire portfolio. Then we set up a Wyoming LLC that owns 0.5% of the portfolio as the general partner. Now, let me explain how this works, the beauty of this. Number one, you don't have to file any tax filings down here. So it's tax efficient. Number two, if I bring a lawsuit, here's the way it works. Let's say I start in Alabama, okay? I go to the Alabama Secretary of State, bringing a lawsuit. What do? I find out it's owned not by you, but by an Arizona limited partnership. When I get to Arizona, I go to the Arizona Secretary of State. Under the law, this, and if I had a color to show this was invisible, I would. This is, you cannot see it. You cannot see the limited partner trust. Private, totally private. Normally, I can see the general partner. But if I use a Wyoming LLC, Ed, we talked about this earlier. If I use a Wyoming LLC, can't see it, can't see you either. So you're completely check the box. What are our check the box? Privacy?
Privacy, yeah. Charging order protected.
Charging order protection?
And now you're looking for post-lawsuit flexibility.
The reason why we know charging order protection is also covered is because Arizona statute's written like Wyoming, very similar. Now, where's the post-lawsuit flexibility? If I bring the lawsuit against this Alabama LLC, and that's where it starts, right? Just to come back to it.
Yeah.
Bring the lawsuit here. What happens to all the rest of the properties?
They would normally be frozen.
Everything normally.
In the better.
That's exactly right. Normally, everything would be frozen. You can't do anything about it. You just have to resolve the lawsuit. Now, under this structure, first of all, let me share with you the preventative nature. I've brought a lawsuit against this, and what happens is if I bring a lawsuit here and I go to Arizona, what do you think the odds are, Ed, of an Alabama injury lawyer being licensed to practice law in Arizona? Almost zero. So can I tell you what's going to happen? They now have to go get co-counsel in Arizona. Which costs more. Yeah. Secondly, I can't even see this limited partner trust. The only thing I can see is the general partner Wyoming LLC, and I don't see very many assets. That's right. There's almost nothing there. So what does that do? That leads me, can I tell you, because I've been there, this attorney now, this personal injury lawyer, here's what he's going to do. He's going to look up here and go, he hasn't even brought it into Arizona yet. He's going to look up and go, oh God, I got to go bring in another lawyer, and I don't see very many assets. They're going to have a sit-down conversation. Ethically, they have to do this with the slip and fall person in Alabama and say, guys, look, we can bring a lawsuit against this structure if you really want to, but I'm going to warn you, not only do we have to add another lawyer up here, which is going to cost more, but I'm not seeing much here. There's a very good chance you're going to end up with a lower recovery if we go through this than if you just take that insurance that's sitting out there right now. Now, that by itself is preventative in nature because you could be spending six figures trying to sue through this.
Now, okay, say that again. So you're saying that a slip and fall person might have to spend six figures to get through all that.
And here's why. One of the things that comes out of a settlement off the top is the attorney's fees. Off the top.
Yeah.
So what if you're getting a recovery and it might look like you're getting a sizable recovery, but the attorney is making an extra six figures out of the recovery?
Yeah.
So now whatever was coming to you is not coming to you anymore. And I know we're talking about this from a different perspective now. We're talking about it from the person who would try to bring a lawsuit against you. So it creates an actual ethical duty on the attorney to go back to that client and say, hey, this is a huge risk right here. I mean, I'm going to make money, but I can't guarantee you will make more money than me. I could end up making more money than you.
This is great. I'm just taking notes. So one question on this. Yesterday we talked about, like, does the Alabama LLC move over underneath the general partnership, or this is covered exactly? This is exactly the way it is.
So yeah, you're moving me to the next thing. So here's what happens, and which is good. Here's what happens now, and I almost forgot this, Ed. Here's the great thing about this too. This piece not only is I'm going to show you the protection, what happens here, but remember, you also have a trust. This takes care. No probate court. No will contest. The trust can take care of all of your estate planning. So it kills two birds with one stone. Wow. This trust can not only act as your limited partner, but it also allows you to take care of all of your estate planning simultaneously within the same structure. Yeah. So that's a huge component for a lot of my clients, because they want to know that their estate planning is taken care of and their asset protection. So this comes back to what you asked. I just wanted to make sure to include that. What happens now if they decide bad case? Let's say someone dies or paralyzed or something like that, and it doesn't matter if there's a risk or not. They're going to extend this lawsuit into Arizona. Arizona statute says this: in the event of a crisis event, and a lawsuit is a crisis event, the law says that the limited partner trust may sever the relationship with the general partner Wyoming LLC after the lawsuit, as long as two things are present. Number one, you need to have the limited partnership agreement must provide that it's allowed to happen in the. You have to write it.
It's got to be in the agreement.
That's right.
So it's got to be. So this is really important, because I just learned this. So that's what's important about doing it correctly with someone who knows what they're doing. And with all due respect to like we all hire friends as our attorneys, and they're like, oh, I can just write this up to you. But what you're saying is, if they do this part wrong, you're still exposed.
Absolutely. If this limited partnership agreement is not drafted properly, every bit of this is vulnerable. Wow. So number one, you've got to draft this properly, and then number two, you got to do it before you get sued. If you try to throw this together, remember the example I shared? Yeah, the guy I talked about earlier, I couldn't put this together for him because he'd already been sued in Tennessee. So I tell people this, it's a peacetime effort, not a wartime affair. You can't throw this together in the middle of bombs going off and you're already in a lawsuit. If this happens, here's what takes place. Now the limited partner trust can do a buyout agreement for the 0.5%. There can be a severance between these two. The limited partner here can take all the remaining assets and exit. Oh, wow. Now what are you left with? Now the only thing you're left with, just for illustration purposes, the only thing you're left with now is the original Alabama LLC that was being sued in this 0.5% that's remaining. Yeah, wow. Now I've got a client with 89 properties. He loves this. Yeah. Why? Because he knows that if one of them gets sued, and it's a really bad liability event, he can take all the rest of his assets, leave with the limited partner trust, set up a whole new structure, and the only thing he has left to contend with is the Alabama LLC and 0.5%.
That's amazing.
And so notice how different it is, though. The reality of it is you got to be good before you can get to better. Yep. And if you've got more than a few properties, best gives you quite a bit more. The problem with it is most people have never even heard about the best, or they don't understand how it all ties together.
Well, what I want to do is I want to take a quick 3-minute break. Let's grab a water, and I want to talk to you about how you guys set this up for people, along with what are actually the fees that go into this. I mean, someone might be watching me like, this has to be just super expensive. I don't know if I should do this, blah, blah, blah. And the other thing I know we're going to talk about in a minute is just, if this has been set up wrong, one of the things that Jeff does amazing in his team is there's no guilt. It's a guilt-free zone when you work with Jeff and their team. And so let's go ahead. We'll take a quick minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap up the show. So thanks, everybody. Okay, we're back. Ed O'Keefe here with Jeff Hampton. We are gonna summarize now, what are the best layers of protection, whether you're doing short-term rentals, commercial properties, you have multiple LLCs, and Jeff's gonna walk us through exactly the best summary and the best protection for you.
Perfect. So I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge fan of layered asset protection, right? Now, what does that mean? That means we need as many layers of protection between you and the attorney trying to bring the lawsuit against you. And so we've covered some of them already, Ed. I know we've discussed a few of them. One that we didn't spend a whole lot of time on is a lease agreement. Now, this is very specific. This is very important for short-term rentals without getting in too in-depth here. But can I tell you, do not trust Airbnb and VRBO for the lease agreements, because they're a platform. If you haul someone into court and you want to evict them, in fact, there was a story recently that came up where there was a woman who's been living in an Airbnb in California, I think for almost a year or over a year, and they can't evict her. They didn't have a lease agreement. They didn't handle it properly. So the point is, this lease agreement needs to set the rules for the relationship. And if you trust on Airbnb or VRBO to set those rules, they don't care. And the court's not going to care. The court's going to say, what was your contract? Show me your contract. This is critical. You can also use what's called liability waivers to help shift the risk of using certain amenities on your property over onto the guest. They initial it. They understand when they come in, they're assuming the risk of that activity. It can help you. You can actually bring a summary judgment against them in court to sometimes get that lawsuit thrown out preemptively if you have a good lease agreement. That's number one. Number two, insurance. We talked about this. If you're doing short-term rentals, you need commercial insurance, right? We went over this and the importance of this. Layer number one, layer number two. I don't know that I went into it too in depth, but you need 1 to 2 million in premises liability coverage.
Correct. Okay.
That's key here. That's a big part of that. Then number three, that's when we start getting into LLCs, right? You need to make sure you have the property in an LLC. We discussed that in depth. That is the next layer. Then we start talking about holding company strategies. And even the better and best that I discussed with you, that is a holding company strategy, right? Both of those integrate that. Finally, that's when you get into even more advanced strategies, which you can take advantage of trusts. If you use a trust, and I'm going to tell you, I work with a lot of doctors, they're worried about being sued from a top-down attack, which means they're afraid of being sued for medical malpractice. They're being sued for those type of issues. What if you get in a car accident and it's above the limits that you have on your car accident coverage, right? Your personal injury protection. You can use multiple different types of trusts, revocable trust, irrevocable trust. The point I want to make is this is important to consider every layer. At STR Law Guys, we actually address each and every one of these issues because to me, it's important to have all the layers with the boxes checked, not just one.
I love it. And so by doing this, it makes it practically impossible to sue you because you're making, and the reason that is because you're making it so you're de-incentivizing the attorney from going after you and saying you just got to go after their insurance.
That's right. That's right.
That's where we want to be.
Look, this is all about, everybody here, if you're an investor, knows this. You want to mitigate risk. Yep. That's why you do your due diligence on a property. That's why you run P&Ls. That's why you do all of that. This is risk mitigation for protecting all the wealth you're spending all your time building.
All right, Jeff, so this has been amazing. We've gone through the good plan, better plan, best plan. Before we go into like how people can work with you and stuff like that, do you mind sharing, is there any other case studies that you can share of like people that had this set up correctly? And then like when lawsuits came, it was, I guess, and you don't have to be too in depth on it, but what does it look like when this is going well?
Yeah, so the example that I gave earlier, which is showing the best structure. Yeah. I have a high net worth client who the only way he knew that this became an issue for him, there was a lawsuit initially that it was brought, another slip and fall claim. Wasn't worth, I don't know that it was really a legitimate claim. I think the same person that brought the claim had brought a lawsuit against another short-term rental owner previously. But he didn't even hardly realize anything had happened because what happened was the personal injury lawyer brought against the insurance company. They tried to file against the insurance company, originally filed a lawsuit against the underlying LLC in Tennessee. But here's what happened. He could never find out who owned it. Yeah. So he didn't know who he was up against. He also found out that there was charging order protection. So there was only a demand letter sent, no actual lawsuit ever filed. Wow. So here's why I know that's important. Because if this person did not have that in place at the time, I know, because having been a personal injury lawyer, he would have taken it to the next step. So it's hard to say, like, Jeff, can you give me an example of someone that went all the way up to a trial and they won because of the structure? Part of the protection of the structure
you never get there.
Is that it doesn't get that
it's
far.
the whole idea of you become very hard to sue.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, which de-incentivizes the attorney. I've said this a couple times, but I think I think that is the key thing, is you're trying to make it so they don't want to go near you. They're like, hey, we'll deal with the insurance companies. Keeps everyone out of it. Question I have for you is there anything that people can do prior to even renting? Like, do you do background checks? Is there any other mitigation stuff that you do, or is it just really not, you don't see it as necessary? Well, so how do you do it with your properties, I guess? I'm going off script here. I'm just kind of like, I'm really curious how you do it.
Vetting people?
Yeah, like vetting people. Because we even had an incident this week where something didn't sound right. They were trying to get in there really quick, and it was like, we just did a quick background check. We're like, oh wow, they've had like 5 small claims court things in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Like they have a pattern of lawsuits.
That's actually a really good point. I know there are some tech solutions that are out there, including insurers. There's one called Safely, another one called Superhog, which is they are newer insurance type arrangements that essentially what they'll do is they provide additional insurance per stay. Yeah. And sometimes what they'll do is, based on which package you try to use with them, they can actually run backgrounds on people. Yeah. And one of the things that can happen is to help put you in a position, if you got a lot of people coming in and out, it's something you got to make sure you pay someone else to keep up with.
Yeah, 100%.
And at STR Law Guys, our main thing is to do that no matter who you have coming in.
Yeah, you're solid. I was asking more just on your own personal investment strategies.
Yeah. So, now I have access to databases and things like that I can actually run people's, they have to provide me a short-term rental lease agreement. They sign off on every one of them, so I know who all the guests are. One of the things I put on my lease agreement is I need to know who everyone is that is staying, right. And I require them to give me their driver's license number, because I need to know which vehicles are coming and who are coming to stay. Yeah. And you can run backgrounds on those. You can find out on that whether or not. I will tell you this: the more you have to lose, the type of properties and the larger your portfolio, yeah. You can outsource that and make that happen. I do that on one of my bigger properties, particularly, that I charge anywhere between $1,500 to $5,000 a night.
So just out of curiosity, more like, why do you want everyone's driver's license, or who's there, plus the cars?
Great question. So sometimes you deal with HOAs, and if they go off premises, this goes back to insurance too. If they go off premises, off your immediate property, yeah. And cause a problem. Let's say they're going to an HOA shared amenities, or a condo. This happens a lot with condos, where they're going to come and park in the condo parking, but then they're going to go use the shared pool and hot tub and all those resources. Yeah. What if they cause a problem with those resources? What if they cause a problem in that parking lot? With HOAs, many times they will hold you responsible even if they pick up citations or tickets or cause property damage outside of your property area. For me, I say, listen, these are the rules for the relationship on that short-term rental lease agreement. And some people will push back and go, whoa. But if they do, I don't know if I want that guest.
That's right.
I'm doing my own personal vetting. If this is a good guest, they're not going to care about that because they're not going to cause a problem.
Yeah. Well, because I think one of the things that's just probably, especially if you have a vacation home that's bigger, like say it can sleep 8, 12, 15, 20, right. And you're renting and they say on paper like, oh, we're bringing 10. You don't want 30 people showing up there and it going crazy. So that's one of the reasons I was just asking on that, which I know there's ways to handle that as well, but.
Yeah, we use, Ring cameras, noise aware software. There's lots of things that we can do to be able to really, from a tech perspective, look and see what people are doing. And we really monitor that. I also have a boots on the ground guy who's literally 2 minutes away. Yeah. If anything happens and I need him, my cleaners are on top of it. These are all things that we create standard operating procedures for. So if any issue comes up, this is exactly how you follow it. Yeah. And now it becomes a business that you're not having to spend all your time running.
Man, I'm going to tell you right now, I think if people work with you, you should make that standard operating procedure checklist available to any of your
Great idea.
Your
happy
clients.
to do it.
Happy to do it? Okay,
Absolutely.
Cool. So I'm working on your behalf right now. I'm just letting you know, right? So speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about this knowledge. This is overwhelming, right, for most people. So how do you work with people, and how do you keep it simple for them so they need to know enough to make sure that they're protected, but the fact of the matter is all the advanced stuff you guys take care of? Can you walk me through the options of working with you guys?
Absolutely. So we want to make it a very customized experience for our clients. So what we do is we take the examples here that we have of the law and how the structures work, but then we have you answer a few questions for us so that we have a good understanding of what number of properties you have, where they're located. Remember all the nuances we discussed earlier about taxes and all those things.
And the goals, like more importantly, what's the investor's goal? That's like, right. Is this, because that'll determine some of the complexity in advance.
100%. And so what we do is we provide you a complete picture of everything, where you're at existing wise, based on what you're telling us, where you want to go. And maybe you're going to plan to scale your portfolio, or maybe you're planning on keeping it kind of where it's at, or maybe you're near the end of the career on that and you want to start selling. If that's the case, a different plan may be a good fit for you. But we want this up here, instead of having just Alabama LLC, Tennessee LLC, we want to put everything you own into your own custom visual, and then we accompany an action plan. No portfolio is identical. Everyone has their own unique challenges. We want to take this knowledge and the law in terms of the solutions here for you, layer it over your specific situation, and then provide you literally the walkthrough from start to finish.
Yeah, I love it. So one of the objections people have had with you is like, well, isn't this going to cost me more taxes, or is this tax efficient?
Great question. So first of all, two different questions. Number one, is it going to cost me anything on my taxes? And the second one is, does it hurt me from an administrative perspective, like with my CPA? Now, I covered some of that here. Does not hurt you at all. You actually could pay less in administrative expenses for your CPA, because if you only have single member or multi-member LLCs without a holding company, you're going to pay a lot of tax filings. You're going to have to pay you're going to have to pay more tax returns. This structure, my guy that's got 89 properties, he doesn't have to pay 89 tax returns. Wow. He doesn't have to do any of those. He only does the primary tax returns for his holding company. That's it. So that answers number one, no additional cost to maintain it. Secondly, when we talk about taxes, why do people want to invest in short-term rentals? Cost segregation studies, bonus depreciation. What does that mean? That means you can write off. Let me give you an example. Me personally, I bought a short-term rental last year, and under the current bonus depreciation structures, I got to write off a $114,000 tax return. I got $114,000, six-figure tax return. And you don't want to lose that, right? $300,000 in bonus depreciation for my property. Got $114,000 back. So how do we want to make sure that we keep that? This structure allows all of your tax benefits to flow up to your personal return. You don't lose anything. And it makes you more lender friendly. And good example of this, just to tie this off.
About lending. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so from a lending perspective, it doesn't hurt your debt to income ratio. People are afraid like, well, Jeff, is this going to hurt me for my next purchase if I'm going to buy in a conventional loan? Absolutely not. You're going to be able to still maintain that. But it really helps you if you're going to do commercial purchases. Think about it. If you walk into a bank and all of your portfolio is in your personal name and not in an LLC, that looks amateur. And a banker's going to go, higher risk, I'm not sure what's going on here. But if you walk in with a structure like that with P&Ls with every one of your properties and you're squared away, I personally have worked with local community banks where they then can give me portfolio loans at preferable rates because they see I've got it all tied together. This is something you can do that helps you be more bankable in the future.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So if someone wants to work with you, they can go to strlawguys.com. Okay. So walk me through, like, I reach out, fill out a questionnaire, and then what are the next couple steps?
After you fill out that questionnaire, you'll have a specific meeting where we will actually go over in depth. We've covered it now a little bit, but you're going to be able to ask questions as it relates to this. You know, even because it's very high level, there's a lot of stuff that's in here. People say, okay, now I see it visually. Now, maybe there's a few tie-in questions. We want to answer those questions. I don't want anyone to ever invest in something they don't understand. So you will have that meeting. We will be able to make sure and answer those questions for you, provide you an action plan, and maybe depending on where you're at, whether you're at good, better, or best, you'll have a plan of action ready to move on, and you're going to do that with our attorneys.
Yeah. Well, or they could just walk away and not do anything, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I think my biggest thing is to empower people with actionable knowledge, and not just talk about things in the abstract. And does it take more work on our end to put that together? Yes, but I think you need that to be able to make a good decision and not just talk about this abstractly and people, move forward with it.
That's right. And so a typical investment, if I'm starting off, say like a seed program or a BEST program, could range anywhere between $5,000 to $12,000 or $12,000. And some people with multiple portfolios, you guys work with all kinds of people, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So on the low end, you could be, if you literally have no properties, you could, and you're just wanting to set something up initially, you could be in that $3,000 to $4,000, all the way up to, if you come to me, I had somebody come to me last week, 15 properties all in their personal name.
Wow.
Right? Well, that could be a $20,000 asset protection structure, but what is $20,000? That's a drop when you could lose $15 million in net worth because of the value of these properties. So our goal is to help people understand this is an investment, it's not an expense. And I have people ask me this all the time. Is it a tax deduction? Can I write it off? Absolutely, you can. You're allowed to write this off. You're investing back into your business, into your structure.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So everybody, you can go to strlawguys.com and fill out the questionnaire, meet with Jeff or one of his team members, and see what they have for you. I want to ask you one more question. So specifically, let's talk about your clientele that specifically are like medical doctors, surgeons, dentists. You have a lot of these doctors that come to you, and whether that's just they bought their commercial property and maybe one vacation home, or they're utilizing this as a bridge to move, replacing their income, and it's a wealth structure or strategy, but also an accelerator to retire.
Yeah.
Where are you finding many of them are just overlooking their protection and they think they have it?
Yeah, a lot of them they've heard something from a friend or a family member or an attorney that doesn't do this but has set up a few LLCs, and they're coming in and they're saying, well, most of them maybe get it right. They move it into a LLC. They get the good part right. Yeah. But they don't understand the better. They'll set up the wrong state's holding company, LLC. And they'll think they have the same protection as they would if they were in Wyoming, Delaware, or Nevada. And then they kind of look at me like, well, I didn't know that. They didn't tell me. And so, or they work with their accountant. And their accountant might be just an ace at all their tax stuff. But the accountant obviously doesn't know what the asset protection attorney knows, just like I would never do your taxes because I'm not your CPA. So I think the perfect blend is to marry the legal with the tax. And for the moment we do that and we start having that conversation, they go, it's like a light bulb goes off and they just say, oh my God, so you're telling me there's a whole nother level of ways that I can protect this, both from my practices, all my individual locations, all of my rental properties. And so the misconceptions we talked about, those exist. But then on top of that, they just want a solution that they're not going to have to spend too much time investing in to get ready. They just want it done right.
Done for them too.
They want it done
right, done for them. Yeah, I think that's
exactly
super,
right.
super important. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's why it's great to hear that so many more doctors are reaching out to you to work with your team, because it's just a no-brainer. And I think one of the things you said to me yesterday was like, we do more than just like short-term rentals. Like a lot of these guys have multifamily and commercial properties, and they don't realize that it's really all the same, but it's got to get protected. It's not all the same.
I'm so glad you said that, because here's the thing. I know we're talking a lot about short-term rentals, but the best structure here, what we call our paper plan, the Premier Asset Protection Plan, this will protect any asset. If it literally has a property right, you can put crypto in it, brokerage accounts. You can put it literally on paper, you can appear to own nothing so that you're a smaller target. And when it comes to, I have a lot of doctors who will come to me too, and their biggest frustration is, Jeff, I can't find anybody who knows enough about other state laws to help me when I buy in other states or if I get into other investments. And will this still protect me if I'm in a multifamily, if I buy an apartment complex, or if I buy a quadplex or something like this? Absolutely. You can integrate any type of investing into this for asset protection.
All right, so this has been awesome. A lot of stuff. And one of the things I just wanted to kind of reiterate is like, it's as complicated as it might sound, that's the reason why people work with you, because you make the complicated super easy and you take it off everybody's shoulders. So I guess my question, Jeff, is like, if I'm watching this right now, I'm probably wondering, okay, how do I work with Jeff, and what's the investment? How does that all work? Do you mind walking us through that a little bit?
Absolutely. So we went over this very high level abstractly a little bit here, the thing I want to do is this is a big decision for you guys to make sure that you're where you need to be for your investments. And so with growing investors, I want to provide a customized solution. There is no asset protection structure that is exactly the same for everyone. You have unique assets that need to be protected. You have certain goals that you have. There's places that you're headed that not everyone else is headed. Yeah. So as a result of that, one of the things we do is we put together a custom visual. That custom visual will show you where you're at presently. You answer a few questions for us so that we have a good concept of where you're at right now. We then put together these options for you, the good, the better, and the best. We walk you through that. You get to see it visually. We answer all those questions and give you a plan and an action step in order to move forward with that. And we want you to have access to attorneys to answer all those questions for you. So it's not as simple, we don't want to push somebody off on someone that doesn't understand how this works. We want to give you that dedicated attention. Normally, we would charge somebody, if you wanted to come to me and do this, we'd be looking at a $2,500 fee to do that. Correct. But for your listeners, I'm happy to do this for $1,000, give that discount. And it's really risk-free, because here's the way it works. If you're listening to this and you need to protect your assets, there's something you need to do. You have to take a step. Whether it's a good or better or best, we subtract that $1,000 from our fee of what it would be to implement all this for you if they decide to work with us. But obviously, how do you even make the decision to move forward unless you first have a plan of attack? And that's what we want to provide to you on that call.
Yeah, what I love about that is is they're taking all the stuff and they're going to sit there and talk to their wife or vice versa. And it's like, well, there's a lot of stuff. Well, invest the $1,000, get it laid out for you. See where you're truly exposed right now. And then I love that you guys credit that $1,000 to them if they decide to work with you. One of the things that a lot of people say, having worked with other asset or lawyers, asset protection or lawyers, or people's like, well, I don't understand a thing that they said, and then I'm kind of on my own. And that's why I love that you guys just do it for people, because buying a book on this is really a waste of time. It's good for you to feel good that you're learning, but it's not real. It's not being in the game. You're just kind of on the outside.
You still have to implement. You have implementation, and just so that people understand how we work if they decide to work with us. Yeah. On the workflow side of things, we don't file anything until we get our client's total understanding and approval. We have at least 2 meetings. We have after the strategy meeting, there is a kickoff meeting, and then what we call a founders meeting, where you get a chance to have input as we execute. Because we want to give you more of that hand. We want to hold your hand through the entire process so that when you get to the very end, the number one complaint that is in the industry for this is, Jeff, I had some guy put something together for me. I have no idea what it is. Yeah. Can you decipher it for me? Yeah. That's a failure of our industry. If someone delivers a product and they have no idea what they got. So from our perspective, we don't want that to happen all the way till the final on the execution of the plan. We don't file anything until you've given us your thumbs up so that we know all is in order.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I just want to reiterate to everybody is this is what they do. This is what you do. This is not I have a lot of buddies who are attorneys, but I wouldn't go to them for this. This is what you do. And I don't know if it's I had a mentor years ago tell me a story about how people that are really successful at one thing think they know a lot about everything. And it's just because somebody's a good attorney or a good accountant or doesn't necessarily mean they're the best at giving you the most efficient, best protected plan for your specific issues. And the other thing I would say is I think you just get what you pay for in life. If you're looking for the cheapest way to do that, you just got to ask yourself, am I really being an investor, or am I being a cost savings penny pincher that's hoping to someday accumulate wealth, versus somebody that's you know what? I want to grow this business. I want to treat it like a real business, and I want to make sure that my wife, my kids, and or vice versa are totally protected on this. And so I love it, And I can go off on tangents on this one, but I think that's the difference between when you decide, am I in to being a winner in something, then the reality is you got to get to the closest to the people that are doing it, which you're doing it, that are the best at what they do. You got to model the people that you're trying to follow, and you got to get mentors and people in your circle that are there to make you better and ensure that you win. Right. Doing it on your own, it's like Game of Thrones. I use this analogy a lot, but when they're sitting there, the 2 sisters, and they've reclaimed their castle back. Right. and they look at each other and they're like, you remember when Father said, you know, like, or they're saying, like, we got to stick together, we got to get the families together, we got to get the kingdoms together. Do you remember when Father said, in winter, the lone wolf dies, but the pack survives? And like, you can't do this on your own. Like, you can't be successful on your own. You can't be the best version of yourself on your own. And so anyhow, that's why I run this podcast, that's why I run the show. I'm just passionate about learning from great people like yourself. So.
Well, I'll tell you one last thing. If any of your listeners are on the fence on this, one of the things I'll throw in as a bonus, if they decide to invest in taking the time to get their action plan, I will also throw in that insurance review for free. It's a bonus to go with it. So just to go with them taking the time to invest in themselves, I think it's important to understand. I learned this a long time ago. I can't do it on my own in anything I do in life. I have to have a team to support me in what I do. And you don't know what you don't know. Correct. And once that's revealed and you understand that, there's things here you won't have to worry about asset protection again. It'll be something that you put behind you.
I love it. I love it. Man, thanks for being on the show. All right, that's it, everybody. Have an amazing day, and I look forward to hearing from you. Make sure you check out Jeff at STR Law Guys and his team, and please share this show with as many people as you can, and we look forward to seeing you soon.